There we go. All right. So welcome, Trent, officially now. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, we were talking about the safety of the Happy Coffee Network just before I hit the record button. And I think that is such a thing that is undervalued and a topic that we tend to, especially once you kind of progress in your coffee career, you tend to forget about that moment when you weren't feeling as safe. But every now and then this feeling will like sneak up on me and give me the feeling like, am I confident enough? Like, am I experienced or expert enough to like speak a truth here? And I think that's where imposter syndrome shows up. And I feel like I used to think when I just started in coffee that it would get better once you learn more and once you become more experienced. And I find that the opposite is quite true. That the more you know, the more you're aware of what you don't know, and you're better at, seeing what other people do know or, seem to know better. And that can make you more insecure as well. Like, so yes, on the one hand, you become more aware of what you do know and the things that you're like experienced in or you've experienced before. So that does give you confidence. But on the other hand, I think it's also interesting to realize that there's also a part of insecurity that will always stay with you no matter how long you've been in coffee. It might even grow because you get this feeling of, I've been in coffee for so long, I should know the answer, or I should know this super famous producer, or I should know this, updated barista competition rule. And God forbid that someone finds out that I don't know everything. And I do hope that in the Coffee Network we can, nurture a culture where people can just admit and say like, I don't know, but we can find out together. And this is where expert as yourself come in as well. Not only to share your wisdom and your experience, but also to show our members that you are human and that you are at times, have been struggling perhaps, or, still don't have all the answers. I think what we're trying to do in the Happy Coffee Network is to get together and realize that everyone has something valuable to contribute, no matter their experience level. And of course, we have this eagerness to learn. So we will use industry experts to learn and grow as professionals. Obviously, I know you a little bit by now, but maybe it would be nice to introduce yourself really, really quick to us.
Yeah, actually what you just said totally resonates with how I got into the coffee industry. So my wife and I learned how to be baristas in Manila in the Philippines. We were, after we got married in 2014, we moved out to the Philippines. My name is Trent, by the way, for those of you who don't know me. And when we moved, I had been living in the Philippines, got married in the US, and we decided to move back together, and we wanted to get into coffee somehow. And I remember the first time everyone was saying, you got to go to EDSA Beverage Design Studio. Those guys are awesome, and you'll learn so much from them. They have a barista program. And really when we looked at the website, they looked so cool. And it was like, we're going to walk in and we're going to look like we don't know anything and feel stupid. And so we kind of nervously walked into the coffee shop. And one of the baristas, she took our order, and then she came and she actually sat down at the table. She said, hey, can I sit down with you and talk? And for us, it was just so mind blowing that like, hey, a barista would want to come and sit down at our table and have a chat. And for us, I think like I attribute that to, being the entry for me into the coffee industry was because a barista took the step to make it more approachable. And so that's what I love about Happy Coffee Network is, there's so many platforms today where there's debate going on, and it's great, but there's a lot of unhealthy debate and intimidation happening as well too. So I think creating, as you put it, a safe network is really important. So happy to be a part of it, and honored that I get to be your first guest for Coffee Talk. This is great.
Hey, yeah, I completely understand how like a barista making the time and the effort to like sit down at your table is something that can really like bring you into the world of coffee for sure. I think one of the superpowers that really good baristas have is to kind of feel when you're on bar, to know what your customer wants and needs. Obviously, you'll have customers that will be like really not appreciative of you being that forward or that bold, and then there's other times that that there isn't an opening for it and a good conversation. And I think, you know, being a really good barista makes you kind of chameleon to kind of feel, you know, what a customer needs and wants that day. Sometimes, you know, the same customer one day can be in a hurry, but doesn't want to skip their regular coffee on that day, but they're catching a train. And the next day they might be coming in with their family and they do want like that interaction and that, you know, quality time. Yeah, so I'm glad that that is the way that you got into coffee for sure. And tell me a little bit about how your career has moved from then, since you first had that first introduction to coffee.
Yeah. So after we, that was what got us into barista training. Both my wife and I went through uh, EDSA's barista training program. And we had always had the idea of opening a coffee shop. I had kind of grander visions of of what the coffee shop would be. Then what it actually became, it ended up being a really small brew bar inside of a co-working space in the heart of Manila's business district. It was called Narrative, and we loved it. It was great to I think at the time it was mostly espresso. It was like either you got espresso coffee or you got like, kind of the 7-Eleven instant. There was no one really doing just like a filter coffee bar. So it was something that was really new for Manila at the time. And so from that, we ended up deciding that we wanted to move somewhere that was not in a big city. So we ended up in 2018 moving to Turkey, which is where we live now. We're on the Mediterranean in the southern city of Antalya. And when we came to Turkey, we were, at that time, in between moving from the Philippines to Turkey, uh, is when I took the exam to be a WCE certified judge, and I took that in New York. And had been doing a lot of education kind of back in the US. We had a year in between being in the Philippines and being in Turkey. And so that, when we arrived in Antalya, it was kind of like, okay, we'll do the same thing again. We're going to open up a coffee shop, and quickly realized that we wanted to, there was a lot of coffee shops, not necessarily specialty coffee, but we felt like we could offer something different. So we ended up opening In Common, and it's a coffee workshop. So mostly a roastery. It also has a tasting bar in it. And then we do education consultations as well too. So I've had the opportunity to play barista, roaster, business owner, and then judge as well too. And I'm really thankful for that breadth of experience. Although I think I see myself getting more into the education and consultation side of things, because it's just so great to see those lights come on for people and people develop new skills and learn.
So what is it that drew you to the coffee competitions?
So it went back to our barista training days. So it was a 2-week program. And then at the end of the program, the guys would actually set up these intimidating spotlights, and you would then do a barista championship style routine. So you'd have to prepare for a panel of 4 judges, 4 espresso shots and 4 milk beverages, and talk about the coffee that you were sharing. And so they graded us using the WBC score sheet. And so that was really like, at the very start, I got introduced to the competition, and along with them started watching more competitions happen from a distance. I was invited to then judge at the national level in the Philippines, and so that's when that was the first year, I believe that was 2016, that I started judging at a national level, judged at a few other national level competitions, and then decided that I wanted to try judging at the world level. So I really am drawn to the judging side of things rather than the competition side of things, because I see it as an opportunity to really support the competition and support competitors from the other side of the table. And that might sound a little bit weird, because sometimes I don't think competitors see often maybe this is just my perspective on things, but that judges are support. I think it's kind of the competitor against the judge, but really why I'm in it is to support competitors and help build the competition world and the coffee world. So
yeah, that makes sense. I remember the moment that I actually got that mindset change because I started competing pretty early in my career. Probably too early, but ignorance is bliss, and I think that not knowing that much was helpful in a way as well, because I was like I was still in that I think the Dunning-Kruger effect calls it the Mount Stupid, like that phase when I just learned about coffee and I thought I knew everything. And that is a good stage to be in to start your first competition. You won't win, but you'll learn a lot. And I did that in 2011, right after I saw my first barista competition here in the Netherlands up close, when I just started working in coffee, and because some of my colleagues were going there to watch the finals of the barista competition here, the national competition. And I just remember seeing those, it was a very high stage as well, like the venue was just really odd. And the competitors were literally like, on a super high stage, and the judges as well. And this was in 2011, so that was, different times as well. But I just remember seeing those judges and competitors on stage, and I just thought that they were all such rock stars. So I wanted to be on that stage as well. So I competed, the first year afterwards, and I still saw these judges as one part terrifying people who see through everything, and know so much more than you, and secondly, a bunch of bullies who are out to score you down. And so I was in this phase like, I'm going to show you that I know what I'm doing, which turns into a very unpleasant energy, I guess, which is what I got back on my score sheets as well, which is good, because then right after that year I was like, okay, back to the drawing table, and maybe start looking at what other people are doing and how they're approaching it. So then I started paying attention, taking some notes, and I actually saw my first WBC in real life in 2013, which was a fun experience in itself because it was in Australia. And I'd been following the WBC on live stream since 2011, and then the Dutch competitor, the Dutch national champion of that year, was actually working for a client of the roastery that I was working at currently. So I was kind of sent along with him as his coach, which I thought I was completely ready for. And then I got to my first WBC and I realized I was not ready for it at all. Neither was he. So I think I met some people backstage there that I still call friends, and they kind of that's to me very says a lot about the coffee industry. Like I met some people there, including Pete Licata, who ended up winning that year, who kind of found me backstage, kind of overwhelmed and having no idea what to do. And they kind of put me back on my feet and kind of helped me I'll taste your coffee and we'll get this show on that stage. And just seeing that arena and those judges and that level of commitment of everyone involved, that's when I got really hooked on the whole thing. And then a couple of years later, when I started competing again myself, and I was also invited to watch other people's runs, we kind of support each other baristas, and then I sat for the first time on the other side of the table to kind of give feedback to other competitors. I had this feeling, and I hope maybe this is something that you recognize, when I was holding the score sheet. Obviously I'm not a trained judge at all, but all I wanted was to tick those boxes. So I was like, please say the right things, please give me that spoon and that napkin, so this is when I realized oh, wait a minute, the judges so deeply want you to succeed. They want to score you those points. And the technical judges, they do not want to deduct those points. They genuinely want you to succeed. And I think that's what you're talking about, what a lot of baristas struggle with sometimes. They think that the judges are their enemy, that are like out to get them, especially if you're, if you spend so much time in preparing and practicing and training, and then you end up the result, not getting the result that you hoped for. And I think that that mind shift has really helped me into like, we're both here for the same thing. We both want to have a good time, and we both just want a good cup of coffee. That's all they want, really. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. I mean, that's when I come to the stage of, you absolutely want the competitor to succeed, and you're like, my goal is to help the competitor as much as possible while still being, a judge, feel that we're there, we're present with them, supporting you guys, because you guys have put so much effort and work into this routine. It's not easy to get up on the stage. And so, of course, we always have to be accurate with the scoring, and professional, but we, at the same time, we're not coming up there going like, oh, we want to cut points off, right? And it's just a pleasure when you get a routine that is like, you get to award a lot of points to and write a lot of positive notes for, and really celebrate, because it's a really special thing. Yeah.
You think that competing is harder than judging, or is it the other way around?
I would say competing is harder than judging. Yeah. Absolutely.
See, I disagree.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because for me as a competitor, I'll explain why. As a competitor, I only have to shine and focus and give it my 100% for those, 45 minutes that I'm on stage. And for you guys, you have to be so focused for, hours, days, sometimes in a row, which I don't think I could pull off. How do you prepare for that?
I mean, when I first judged my first competition, I don't feel like I was prepared for it. Like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I went through a 2-day judges calibration in Manila before we judged the first competition. And then you get up on stage and you see, how fast moving the competition is. You don't have a lot of time between competitors. I think that year we only ate cookies in between the competitors as well too, just something to absorb the espresso, the caffeine, and then move on to the next one. But yeah, I think like, for me, it's not a problem. The way that I look at it is like, the competitors have put in so much work into their routine, and to get to the stage, and it's our responsibility to put in, to honor that work that you guys put in by preparing as best we can too. So it comes down to reading and understanding the rules and regulations, and making sure that you're, kind of in your best condition. You're showing up. You're not, partying the night before and then showing up as much as possible. It does happen, but that you're ready for a day of competitors too. And I think, when I think about preparing for a competition day, I always think about the last competitor, because often that last competitor is coming in front of judges who have judged 5, 6, 7 competitors previously. They're on their 20th espresso shot, of the day. And so it's always making sure that you're able to show up at the end for that competitor like you did with the competitor in the beginning, at the beginning of the day, just to give everyone as equal a chance as possible.
Yeah, that must be hard though. How do you deal with those large amount of coffee that you have to drink on such a day? Like,
so caffeine never really affected me too much. I'm starting to feel it as I get older. My wife is laughing because when I judged WBC in Milan, at the end of the day, it was hard to even get bottled water in Milan for the judges. I think we only had one at lunch. So we had to search it out, and sometimes we didn't have time to do that. And I was finding myself having these big existential crises after the competition.
Wait, every single competitor gives you water. Like you should be able to hydrate, right?
That is true. The competitors do give water, but I think you still are hoping for a little bit more. So it was just the uniqueness of, it was the middle of COVID and there was a lot going on. Yeah, I think it's, I also been the judges coordinator for SCA Turkey, and one of the, that's, I get to see that side of things now these days, and I've realized how important scheduling is for judges as well too, and the competitions, to make sure, I think it comes down to the organizer side to make sure that the judges do have an opportunity to take a lunch break and get good nutrition, so that they can be their best throughout the day as much as possible. The judging is a, it's a team sport, right? So if someone's not feeling good, they'll say hey, I'm not feeling good, can someone substitute for me for this last routine? And that happens quite often as well too. So it really is about supporting each other backstage too.
So recently you started sharing valuable information from your experience as a judge. Why? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it comes out of that desire for wanting competitors to do as best as they can, and getting on the stage and seeing so many mistakes that are preventable being made, that just come from a lack of maybe understanding the rules and regulations or familiarity with the rules and regulations. And so it was kind of when I was in Melbourne this year, hearing some of the confusion around the rules still by experienced competitors. These are people at the world level, and there's still confusion around it, and realizing that there needs to be far more open lines of communication on both sides. Just because I can't talk to a competitor or go into the competitor's room backstage doesn't mean that when I'm not at the competition, we can't have the conversations like we're having today. And I think that those are really important. And I think that, often they haven't happened because there's been a desire not to, have conflicts of interest or kind of compromise the integrity of the competition. But there was, even at the Melbourne competition, there was a question that I had about, what does it mean for a judge to coach? Like, what does World Coffee Championships mean by that in the rules and regulations, right? At the national level, am I able to help the national competitor get ready, or does that, and at the time the rules weren't clear about that very much. And so then I started asking a lot of the people, at the competition, the reps, head judges, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to coach a competitor? Or when are you just helping or consulting? How do we define that? And I'm really happy that WCC clarified that in these new rules, that judges can actually provide, assistance, and they cannot coach at the competition themselves. So kind of the rule is, once you hit that the start of the judge's calibration, there can be no more contact really between the competitor and the judge, and there shouldn't be. So there shouldn't be ongoing coaching. But they did really open it up to, okay, before the competition, there is a lot more opportunity for information sharing both ways. And so once that was kind of made clear, that was kind of like the go signal for me. I was like, I have so much that I want to share that, for some competitors might be obvious, and they're like, yeah, I do that. I know that everyone knows, this rule, but you'd be surprised how many people don't know the rules and regulations. And so it's just my opportunity through Simpler Coffee just to share and help competitors become more knowledgeable about the rules. I would way rather spend time at competition focusing on the competitor's routine rather than disqualifying or docking points because of, just like a really small mistake or oversight with the rules and regulations. And so I think if we can get to that point and increase that, then the competitiveness of the competitions would be better. It's going to be a more fun competition as well. And we'll see, the level of competitiveness get higher and higher.
Yeah, I can imagine that you'll also leave, if you help somehow establish that dialogue beforehand, that it will help competitors as well to learn more about how they potentially messed up, which means they will learn more from the process rather than there's nothing as deflating as, you know, making a mistake that you could have prevented. I think, coming from personal experience, like when I look back at that, you know, young, obnoxious Wendelin back in 2011, obviously I kind of browsed through the rules and I read them once, and it's like, oh, I think I kind of know the hang of this. And I've, you know, when looking at other people, and I made all the mistakes that a lot of first timers do. And then I remember feeling like, oh, okay, so like 9 out of these 10 mistakes that I made could have been prevented. And then there was like 100% of the judges team were like, yeah, like honestly, one thing that still makes me cringe when I think back at it, because I had some sort of coaching, like I did ask for help to someone who had some experience coaching. And he told me, for instance, you know, it was 2011, like the technical judges need to see that they need to evaluate that your portafilter is clean, right? Like, so if you want to be helpful to them, you should show them your portafilter, which I was like, okay, show them portafilter clean. And then there's like levels of clean, and my level of clean was different because I was just new in the industry. It's like, this looks clean, and it was different from the standard of like, what is clean? What is a clean portafilter? Like I had no idea that this is like things that you can discuss, you know, you can talk about. So there's a YouTube video of me like really being a good girl and showing my not so clean portafilter every single time to my technical judge, thinking I was like scoring full points, and every time she was like, damn it, now I need to score it down again, like and all those kind of things that that could have been prevented. And even since I've been, you know, watching what you've been sharing, especially because the rules change a little bit every year, or a lot even, like the flashcards that you've been making, like I felt called out, and I call myself like an experienced competitor, even though my first and last WBC experience was in 2019. There's, you know, the nit and gritty of these rules and how that leaves room for interpretation and how judges interpret that, I think is information that is very difficult to access for competitors. So the, you know, the mistakes that I've made have taught me things, and the other knowledge that I have about how to prepare for a competition and how to interpret the rule comes from other more experienced competitors who are also just interpreting the rules. But because there's this gap in communication that you mentioned between judges and competitors, maybe because the competitors are too scared to ask, or because judges feel reluctant because it's not really sure what they can and cannot say, we just don't communicate at all. And I think that's such a that can leave both judges and competitors quite deflated at the end of the competition. And there's also practical things, like after my WBC performance in 2019, we had the debriefing, and I think that is such a perfect opportunity to, you know, ask the questions that you have. And I always sense that judges are kind of like dreading that moment. I don't know if you've experienced this, but because it's so unclear, like what you can, like all they know is like, we cannot coach, we cannot coach, we cannot coach. Like, so it's very difficult to say like, okay, what can I say to help this person? And, you know, in 2019, the judge that I got for my debriefing was not even a judge that had seen my performance. So there you're like, you know, all he had to hang on to was my score sheets, and he was like, well, this person wrote this, so that probably means that. I'm like, okay, would have been nice to talk to someone that actually like had me at the table. Like, I think secretly you're also looking for compliments, and I think that debriefing is such a valuable moment. I don't think that a lot of competitors, or I think that not all competitors value that debriefing as much as it is. I think because we get so caught up in that primary emotion, like obviously there's going to be one person that's super happy and everyone else is going to be kind of bummed and sad to different levels of degree. And someone wise once told me, who happened to win the WBC in 2018, Aga, she told me once, like, whatever happens, go to debriefing and learn. Like, this is, no matter how much you're upset or you're angry, or just always go to debriefing and always compose yourself. because those judges, you might see them again next year, and you want to, present yourself as a person, like you're mentioning, like as judges, and also not as competitors, but you think about the way it's like about this mutual respect that you have for each other, like we're both putting in so much time and effort, and not showing up at the debrief or not making use of that super valuable, even if it's just 15 minutes, is I think a opportunity that some competitors tend to miss. How do you find those debriefings?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I actually personally look forward to the debriefings, because I think it's a challenge. You have to be truthful about what happened, while at the same time we're trying to encourage people to compete again. And so that's an interesting kind of tension to manage, and it's one that I do enjoy. I do. There is a lot of awkwardness though.
There's a
And I
lot of
know
emotion there at that
there's a
moment.
lot of emotion, yeah. And exactly, that's, I've often wondered if there's a better way that we could do debriefing, because kind of the stepping off the stage, and there's so much adrenaline at that point too, right? Like often, if it's the finals, the finalists have just been announced, what ranking they're in, the winner's been announced, and it's all of a sudden like, hey, let's all meet up in the back room and talk about, what you did well and what you could have done better. And so there's just a lot of emotion. I feel, for the competitor who has that emotion, and then at the same time is tasked with looking at their score sheet and coming up with questions that are going to help them for next year. I just don't think that that's necessarily the most appropriate time to be doing a debriefing. It's interesting. I was, in making the flashcards, noticed that I think it's still a leftover clause from COVID, was that it was made okay to do online debriefings. And so I talked with WCC about this and said, is that something that's still an option, or is that up to date, or something you want to change because we're doing things in person again? But that got me thinking, maybe that would actually be a more valuable thing, would be to give competitors their score sheets, have that time for them to look over it, try to read some of the very hard to read notes of the judges, and understand them, and then generate their questions and come, at a debriefing that's in an online format, that's a few days after the competition, when kind of everything is settled a little bit, and we can start to think about those things, or both. And maybe it's doing the debriefing as it is, but then having that option for competitors who want just a little bit more, clarity about those notes. So I do think it is something it is difficult on both sides, but it's really important because you can only write so many notes on the stage and in backstage, and so to really get clarity about what a judge meant is really important, and can be game changing for the future too.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine that there's a lot of things that you're saying that makes, from a competitor point of view, so much sense. Like, as you're saying, like the adrenaline and the emotion coming off, like straight off that stage, straight into the debrief, makes it really difficult to absorb any kind of information, in my experience. And you're either, dealing with the disappointment or the excitement, and then having to, come up with smart questions, because that is your only chance to ask smart questions. Like, that is your one-on-one time with the judges. I don't, well, for me, it's never been more than an opportunity to like kind of take a breather, look at your scores, and thank the judges for their time, because that's mostly what my brain has been able to put up with. And then doing like an online, like because sometimes it feels really difficult as well, like you get the chance to ask your questions, but as a competitor, you're not really sure what kind of questions are allowed, and as a judge, it's not really clear what kind of answers you can give. So I think that's, I agree that they're definitely interesting to look at how we can improve that, to get more value out of that, which will then in turn increase the quality of the competition in itself. I'm going to take a quick sneak peek at my notes because we had some really cool questions from some of our members. One of the questions that I liked was, what is your absolute favorite moment in your time as a judge? Like, what was your highlight in your judging career?
Yeah, I'd have to say it was the 2021 WBC in Milan. So I had the honor to be chosen as a finals judge for Milan, and it was something that I didn't expect at all. So I think there's kind of an under or hidden competition going of between judges as well, of who's going to get to judge the semifinals, who's going to get to judge the finals. And so you want to be on your game and being accurate and supportive of the competition backstage. And so I always just assume that I'm not going to judge the next round, and then I get, if you get chosen, then you're pleasantly surprised. So I got chosen to judge finals, and Lauro Fiorelli was the one of the head judges. We did it a little differently that year because there were so few judges, and we'd all judged so much and over caffeinated. So I think that was the first year, or one of the only years, where the judges weren't the same for all the routines. So I judged 5 of the 6 finalists, but I didn't judge one of them. And so he, once they had announced who was going to be judging finals, he looked at all of us and said, today is a big day. Today you're going to change someone's life. And when he said that, it was like, just like goosebumps, like it just like helped us to see like how high the stakes were for the finals round. And that was when Diego Campos won WBC, and I had actually seen him backstage, doing, I'm guessing they were mindfulness exercises, but I had made eye contact at one point with him. And I just like was watching him prepare, and it was a reminder of what a big deal of this was for the competitors as well too. And so to see him win at the end of that, and I had no idea who was going to win, really after judging, because everyone had done a phenomenal job in the finals. But when he had won, it was just kind of like this really special moment of like, Lauro had told us that, and then I had seen just what a big deal that was for him backstage as he was preparing as well too. And so I'll never forget that. Like, it was just I think I ran out of there and I called my wife and I was like, guess what just happened? And it was just like so special. So yeah.
I'm glad that you guys are getting goosebumps from those kind of moments too. And I think it's also amazing to hear that, it's that you're aware of the significance of such moments, not just for obviously WBC, which is the biggest, but also just national champions. I mean, those, winning those kind of events, go up in there and being like best days of people's lives. And you can be helpful in that for sure. And there's only so few people who make it to that point. So I think it's amazing to hear that the judges backstage are aware of that responsibility almost. I mean, not that I didn't think that was the case, but yeah, that is such a positive motivation for you as well, which is, yeah, great to hear. Have there been also moments that, you have been like a true low point in your judging moments?
Yeah, I think the low points come kind of after the competition ends and going home. And this is actually
you get the
that,
blues too?
yeah, we definitely do. And actually, Lauro mentioned this when right before he had said that, or after he had said that, he said he mentioned about him flying home and just rethinking the whole competition and the decisions you made, and the competitors that did well and didn't do well, and feeling like this kind of sense of like excitement, but also like the sadness for the competitors that maybe didn't get the result that they wanted. And I think just a questioning of like, you start to self-question the decisions you made as well too. And not to say that you would do them differently, but you see the work that people put into it, and then when you realize that you're the reason that they didn't score higher necessarily because of, it's in part because of the scores that you wrote on their score sheet, which I would argue are often, you know, accurate. It's still a hard thing. And so I realized that I experienced that after Melbourne, especially because the flight was so long coming back to Turkey, and just like this kind of sense of like, um, you know, excitement about what happened, but then also just like this sadness as well, and heaviness of just like feeling, you know, people conversations in the debriefing room, or you know, conversations around maybe some of the problems that people had with the rules and regulations of the competition at the time, and kind of carrying the weight of that a little bit. So it is like it's, and then there's the, I think, just the letdown after any kind of event too. So it is really an emotional thing, I think, for both competitors and judges, where you hit that high point of, you know, the finals announcement is kind of the peak, and it just kind of, you know, so you feel that crash after.
Do you feel that sometimes judges have to be prepared to be like punching bags for disappointed competitors as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an expectation that competitors would be respectful to an extent. You see that in the codes of conduct, but there is that. There definitely is that. Like you'll hear, and everyone that I'm friends with in the competition, talking with them after, they've been very gracious not to direct their comments directly at me. But I also am keenly aware that I'm part of this group of judges that, you know, they're talking about, you know, maybe being frustrated with, or having a problem with, or having difficulties with the results of the championship. So it does happen like that. I think that's part and parcel with the responsibility of a judge as well too, and why it's really important for judges to be writing good notes to justify those scores. You know, especially if you are maybe a half a point or a point lower than the rest of the group of judges. Having those good notes then can help you kind of help the competitor understand why that was. And maybe it was just that all the other three had, you know, great foam texture, and yours was not that way. You know, maybe you got the last one and it was lower in points. I know that there's, you know, I've seen some notes written by judges where it's like, I just didn't like that. Well, at that point, you know, that's not a helpful note, or it's not a helpful comment. And so it's important to be justifying your scores with notes and supportive notes as well.
So basically that, you know, because the competitors have to back up all their statements with why they're doing something or why they're saying something, the judges have to do the same?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a super practical question.
Mm-hmm.
What if someone wants to become a judge? How do you get from being a barista or coffee professional to being a judge on the WBC stage?
Yeah. So to get to be a judge at WBC, you have to have either judged for 2 separate years of finals in the final round, or you have to have judged 1 year in the finals and taken the WCEP program, World Coffee Education Program, I believe is what it means. So the question is, how do you get to judge nationals or regionals? And that really depends on, it varies from national chapter to national chapter. So when I wanted to judge in Canada, my home country, it was simply a matter of me applying, and I had to fill out a form, and they decided that I was, you know, good judge material. The Philippines was the same too. I had to have references of people who could back up that I was actually a good candidate to be a judge. In Turkey, we've been quite a bit stricter with this. So we have a 5-step national judges certification program where competitors have to pass a rules and regulations exam. And then they have to go to a 1-day workshop, take an online webinar, and then they have to pass calibration with a WCE rep, and then they have to actually judge at the competition. And if they miss any of those steps, they don't get certification. at the national level. So it's a little bit more strict what we're doing here. So it really varies from national chapter to national chapter. But once you have those 2 years of judging at a competition and you were chosen to judge finals, then you can actually take the exam to certify as a World Coffee Championships judge. And those happen periodically throughout the year in different places around the world. I know that there's one coming up before Athens. And then those judges that pass will immediately get to judge in Athens as well too. So
straight into the lion's den.
Absolutely.
So other than those certifications and knowing the rules inside out, what other character traits do you think that a good judge need? Because you have quite some experience judging with all different types of people. Is there like a specific character set that people need to become good judges?
Yeah. So I'd say there's quite a few of them. World Coffee Championships has a document that is core competencies, and it highlights which core competencies are more important than others. And so one of those, to summarize and paraphrase, would be you have to be able to focus really on what's in front of you, and wear blinders in a sense to not see other things. So that comes with judging specific categories on the score sheet. So for example, you're analyzing taste, and you have to be very careful not to analyze tactile as part of the taste category. So that's just a really practical example of that. But there's other ways as well too. I mean, like we're all aware of the competitors and their accomplishments, their resumes essentially, and their past experience. And so you also have to, when you're coming on the stage, in a sense, as much as possible, understand the bias that you might bring to the routine, and then to mitigate and I think it's first acknowledging that bias and then mitigate that as you're judging as well. So that could be with a competitor, that could be with a type of coffee. If I'm really drawn to natural processed coffees, and I love those coffees, then I'm aware of that, and I need to understand that it's not just about my preferences, it's really about trying to look at quality as objectively as possible and to calibrate according to a head judge as well too. So I think it's that element of focus, but then also the ability to understand that, yes, like my experience as a judge is really important, but we're also doing this as a group. There's 4 sensory judges, a head judge, often 2 technical judges, some shadow judges. There's like a huge team of judges, and so it's not just about what I think, but it's about what the group thinks as well too, and how we're all interpreting that together. And so that comes down to deliberating backstage, knowing how to walk the line of how much do I assert my own experience of the routine, and how much do I say, listen to the other judges as well as they're sharing their experiences, and be open to, what they're saying as well too. And that comes down to, that's why the deliberation time is so important after. So I'd say, yeah, those 2 things: the ability to focus and the ability to be confident in your own judging ability, but also understand that you're part of the team. Those are really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have 2 more questions for you before we wrap this up. The first question is, this year is the first year that the Coffee Championships have allowed plant-based milks into barista competition.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about judging that? Like, that must be a scary thing to have such a massive change into, brought into the barista competitions. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so I'm actually really supportive of that rule change. I know it's pretty controversial, but I do think that the competition has to resemble in some way the experience of being a barista and having coffee in a coffee shop. And there's already so many differences, of course, between the two, but I mean, the global trend towards plant-based milks and alternative milks is something that I do think needs to be reflected in the competition. And so after Melbourne, I actually wrote a blog post about this, and that was one of the pieces of feedback that I had been hearing a lot, was the desire for that to be added. I think it's interesting that the competition strategic committee they made the evaluation protocol and expectations so broad. And my guess is, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but my guess is that they probably want to kind of open it up as much as possible, allow as much creativity as possible, and then identify what some of the problems are and create additional structure going forward. But I believe it's going to be really challenging for the competitors as well, because there's still that expectation of a harmonious beverage with sweet and creamy milk. And so accomplishing that with alternative milks is going to be a challenge for sure. I think that there's a lot of conversations about how someone using plant-based milk might automatically put themselves at a disadvantage. And I'm excited to be proven wrong, to have that, be proven wrong, because I think we've seen so many times competitors have done things that are just like totally unexpected and come out with such a great result. And I think that this is the opportunity to do that in the milk beverage course.
Yeah, I think it's also another one of these opportunities that you talked about earlier for judges to be super aware of their own personal bias that they might have. I personally, it took me quite a while to start embracing plant-based. I've never been big on soy, but I'm kind of like reluctantly now getting into like and more enthusiastic about oat milk. And I can tell that from drinking it more and more, you do develop your palate a bit more towards that direction as well. So I think the biggest challenge is going to be like, how experienced are we as both competitors and judges in like how often have you tasted the combination and in what kinds, and how broad is your flavor library in that. That is going to be the biggest thing in that. But I guess that's been, and for sure that's going to be a bigger challenge than with regular dairy we've had so far, but also looking at the wide variety of milk that we have been having in the last couple of years. Like, it's another thing. We've already been, even just within dairy, we've been expanding so much, getting so many different flavors in there. That I think that it's going to be just another big challenge for you as judges, but also as competitors. I guess we'll have to see where it takes us. But I think trying is better than not trying at all and just pretending that it doesn't exist. So I guess acknowledging that we're all just trying and doing our best, and that nothing is perfect. But we're all here to kind of push the industry forward is the biggest thing. Having said that, my last question to you, if there's something that you could change, let's not just say competition, but the coffee industry in general, what would it be? If you have the power to change one thing as Trent, what do you want to do?
It's a great question, because I'm taking the coffee sustainability program right now. And so these past few weeks for me have just been eye-opening to the realities of inequality and the sustainability issues that we face in the industry. I'm really happy to see competitors bringing those concepts to the competition as well, because I think it's important. I think if I was to put it into one word, I would say accessibility. So accessibility, broadening accessibility for people from all different parts of the world to information, to resources that are going to help either them build their own careers or help them improve as competitors, so that it's not reserved. This information that is so valuable, these experiences that are so valuable, aren't reserved for people who are just the most well-resourced people in the industry. And I think specifically in the context of championships, you see a big imbalance, and there are, I would say, it's not an equitable competition. There's so much more that we can do to create it, to build the equitability of the competition and make it a little bit more open and accessible for a broader range of people. And so I think we're making small steps forward, but I think that there's still a lot of growth opportunity for that. And so both in just the industry in general, but specifically in the competition. That's one of the reasons, again, why I've been sharing this information, is because I don't think it should be reserved for people who can afford a really expensive coach. There's always going to be that aspect as well too, but a lot of this information should be made, more open and accessible to just the community in general.
Is this also
really
why
important.
you started offering your coaching package?
Yeah. So I have a judge feedback package right now, which basically provides competitors with the opportunity to send me a video of your routine. I'll review it, fill out a score sheet, and send it back, just so that you have an idea of maybe how your routine will score before you get to the stage. And I'm in pricing that, it's been, what's going to be good for me to support my family, but then also at the same time make it more open to people who might not be able to afford an expensive coach. Same thing with the flashcards as well too. It's just like an opportunity. It's a pretty cost-effective tool, I believe, to better learn the rules and regulations of the competition. And so that's the direction that I want to go with my company. And that's what I would love to see with the competition as well. And so I think I really commend WCC for already opening up the rules and regulations to have more communication between judges and competitors. I hope that that opportunity will be taken advantage of, by judges and by competitors as well too. And I think your approach to just writing someone and saying, hey, can you help me? I just have this question about this thing. Like, I would encourage people to do that, because I'm more than happy to answer those questions. You don't have to pay me for that. I can just give you an answer. But it's scary to do that, but it can have its payoffs in the end. So
I think it's just a matter of like being respectful of someone's time and efforts. Once, not too long ago, someone told me that this is like one of my strengths, that I'm able to ask for help. And I thought, I was offended a little bit at first, because like, are you calling me weak? Or like my upbringing told me like that I should be offended. Like, are you saying something mean, or are you saying something nice? And it turned out that he was honestly trying to, pay me a compliment, because apparently a lot of people struggle a lot with asking for help and asking for support. And I figured that if that is something that I'm good at, asking for help either on my own behalf or on someone else's behalf, then that is what I should be doing. And that is what I'm trying to do with the Happy Coffee Network as well, like just trying to get people access to people like yourself, but also other resources, just because I'm good at asking for them. And then I hope then that way we can kind of, just in our own little way contribute a little bit to a better and more inclusive coffee industry in a world, as it were. Yay, so deep and so so optimistic as well. Yeah, I'm quite an optimistic person. All right. Thank you so much, Trent, for your time. Thank you for answering about 90% of my question. I might have some more, but I will ask those at a different occasion for sure. I'm just going to stop the recording, but thank you.
Yeah,